We're live. My guest today is Shane Vitarana. He is the co-founder of Stargaze. We're going to be diving deep into Stargaze today, understanding the technology stack, the future of NFTs, and also, some interesting concepts around standards in the NFT ecosystem. NFTs are growing in Cosmos, and we need better standards. So we're going to be talking about that. I'm also dying to find out why Shane thinks we need more application builders and that we're spending way too much time on infrastructure. Before we get started, make sure to hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to get notified when I go live every week. And remember that none of what we discuss here is investment advice. If you enjoy this content, please consider sticking with us. We're live on Evmos and Quicksilver, and soon on Osmosis. Just look for Interop in the active validator set. My guest, Shane Vitarana, is coming up next, right here on the Interop. Okay, hi. We're actually live this time. We've had a couple of technical issues today, but we are getting started once again. So I've been trying to get you on for quite a while. Stargaze is a project that obviously it's everywhere in the Cosmos ecosystem. We see Stargaze NFTs in everybody's PFP. I've got a couple of bad kits myself. I've got some tokens, I'm staking, but it's a project that I don't have a huge grasp of the technology stack, what's unique about it, and also the things that you guys are working on in terms of standards for longer term prospects of NFTs in the ecosystem. So we'd love to talk about that. And before we get started, I know you have a long history in Web 2 and as a developer and builder in the ecosystem. So tell us a bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I come from a background building in Web 2 and mobile. Kind of started in Web 2.0, working on Ruby on Rails. Did a lot of open source with Ruby on Rails, and also was one of the first people at Groupon. So through kind of my work with Rails, I got exposed to kind of a lot of the startups like GitHub and Shopify and Airbnb, and got to know some of those founders and stuff. And just kind of been a builder for a while. After Web 2.0, when I saw Steve Jobs announce the iPhone, I kind of, knew that that's going to be kind of the next big platform to build on. And then I kind of switched to mobile. I built a couple of apps that did really well in the App Store. I built an app called Drum Kit, which is kind of one of the first audio apps in the App Store. You can just, play drums on the phone. It did really well. It got over 10 million downloads in its time, and it got featured on Apple billboards and TV ads and stuff like that.
That's cool.
And then kind of after building apps for a while, I kind of got bored of that. I felt like I kind of reached kind of like a limit or peak there. And a friend of mine exposed me to Ethereum. And I just loved the wide open design space, and and also just the people in the community just reminded me a lot of the early web, right? Is a bunch of misfits kind of playing around and trying to figure this out and build some cool stuff. So because my background though is in kind of consumer tech, Ethereum wasn't at that time in 2017 and 2018 wasn't scalable enough for the kind of things that I wanted to build. And then another friend of mine introduced me to Cosmos. She brought me into a cafe and was like, okay, we're going to read the white paper now. And
the first white paper, the version 1.
The first one. And it kind of blew my mind, and I had to read it 3 or 4 times to understand all the terminology, right? Because Cosmos just uses different terms like zone instead of side chain or chain and stuff like that. So I just really dove in. The way that Cosmos scales with IBC just kind of really made sense to me as someone coming from a background of the web. And just started building on it.
Yeah, that's cool. And what led you to want to build Stargaze? Like, at what point did you say I want to build an NFT platform?
Yeah, sure. So early on, I was working at True Story, which is what was kind of one of the first kind of like venture funded startups that was building on Cosmos. But
What was they doing again?
it was
It
too
rings
early.
a
It was
bell.
like it was like building a protocol to like try and solve fake news. So people would
Yeah.
like post an article and then people would stake either for
Mm.
it or like against it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I think I remember that.
yeah, and building something like that, it's maybe even too early to do that now.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so Osmosis wasn't live yet. It was really kind of hard to launch a token on Cosmos at that time. You had to do like a IEO or something like that on Binance, and we didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so after True Story ended, um, I wanted to kind of build kind of like a social consumer type thing with Cosmos. So we actually started building like a decentralized Twitter type thing, right? And while building that, we realized that this tweet format is an NFT, and there weren't really NFTs in Cosmos at that time. So um, out really like outside of Terra, there wasn't like NFTs weren't a thing in like the greater Cosmos.
Were there
So
NFTs in Terra?
yeah. So Terra was a Cosmos. First version of Terra was a Cosmos
Yeah.
chain, and yeah, they were one of the first kind of chains to launch NFTs in Cosmos.
Okay. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
remember. I mean, I didn't like play around a whole lot in Terra other than like getting wrecked in Anchor, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I didn't realize they had such a big NFT presence there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so now Stargaze has more NFTs than Terra ever had, but they're the ones that kind of got started.
Mm.
Yeah, so when we were building this platform, we realized that we had to do NFTs first, because we kind of had to do that to build what we wanted to build. And then the natural thing was gravitate towards a marketplace because you need like the DEX for NFT trading, right? So we started working on the marketplace, and we did. So after the chain launched, we did a large airdrop, and I think at that time the airdrop was worth something like 150 million. It was crazy because it was like
Yeah.
top of like the bull cycle at that time. And then this community kind of like sprung out from the airdrop, right? I mean, a lot of people just came and just like claimed the airdrop and then dumped the token, but the people that ended up staying created like the base of the community, the community, which is really awesome right now. And they kind of informed and suggested what we should build. So when we were in the middle of building the marketplace, a bunch of people, came up to us and were like, "Hey, we need a way to launch the collections. We can't just trade it in the marketplace if there's no way to launch it, right?" So then we stopped working on the marketplace and then we started working on the launchpad.
Okay.
So now to this day, those are like the two main apps on Stargaze, which is the launchpad and the marketplace.
Yeah,
So
I
now we
was
just cover the whole
checking out the
pipeline.
launchpad earlier, and it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we're working on making it a lot better. Right now it's just kind of like a list of all the projects that have launched, but we're going to start like sorting them by mint volume, and having like a trending section. There's going to be a trending section in the marketplace as well.
Yeah. And like give me a sense of like how big is Stargaze? Like how big is the team? What's your like, how many people are using the platform? How do you guys making money? What's your burn rate? That kind of stuff.
Oh man, I'm not super great with all the numbers, but I can do my best. So Stargaze is about 12 to 15 people now, right? We also have a lot of people from the community, so it's very hard to put like an exact number on it, right? Because there's the validator set, but then there's also a lot of people that work with the creators. There's a lot of people that help the creators launch, right? So there's a lot of people that do it without getting paid from the team. They just like doing it, and then there's people who are paid from the team as well. So that's why it's between 12 and 15 people. I would say about it's about half engineers and half kind of BD and operations type people right now.
Okay. And how do you I mean, I guess you generate revenue from fees, like minting fees and fees when people are trading NFTs, which is how like the company makes money, right?
Yeah, well, so Stargaze's tokenomics was based on osmosis, where and also Bitcoin, where it started with a very high rate of inflation, right? So so Stargaze actually doesn't have much fees right now. There's zero gas, and we have this fee mechanic called fair burn, and it's based on EIP 11559, where half the fees are burnt and half of them go to stakers.
Yeah.
So so right now, the only fee that actually goes into the community pool is if you mint a name. So right now there aren't too many fees on the platform.
So those 50 stars, when you're minting a name, that goes straight into the community pool.
Right. Yeah. Half goes in. No. Half is burned and half go to stakers.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Got it. So yeah, I'd love to talk about the stack here, because I was listening to like a Twitter Spaces you did with Vish from Quicksilver earlier, and realized there were some things that I had no idea about, right? And so, but first, it's I think it's on the website. It says like Stargaze is the most decentralized Cosmos chain, or something to that effect. Can you explain what that means, like how you stand behind that claim?
Sure. So in Cosmoverse last year, we won this award for the most decentralized chain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think what they did is they looked at like the Nakamoto coefficient,
Okay.
and kind of based on that. Yeah. So I think based on all the Cosmos chains, I think our Nakamoto coefficient was like 10 or 11 or something like that. And I think most of the chains are something like 7 or 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's pure. It's just a Cosmos award.
Yeah.
A Cosmoverse award. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about like community governance, because I thought that it was more along the lines of like community governance than validator distribution, which I guess is important. But I'd love to learn more about like how things are governed by the community. Like we were talking earlier off air about how there's been some fee changes and that were decided by the community. And I think I saw in one of your responses in a tweet that I posted that like things are in flux, and that there is like a lot of community input here on how the protocol is governed. So we can talk about that a bit later. So yeah, tell me what the stack looks like. And I guess for comparison, if you're looking at like a very vanilla Cosmos SDK chain, how would Stargaze stand out in terms of what the software is doing, like additional modules, some like unique WASM stuff, and one thing I'm particularly interested in is like your integrations with IPFS and how that works.
Sure. Yeah. So so Stargaze started off as a vanilla WASM chain, but it has some custom modules. So so it has some custom modules for some of the allocations, for the minting of the tokens, because it doesn't follow the same kind of inflation pattern of the hub. So it's more like osmosis, where there's a third inning, right? So there's a third inning every year, but it doesn't have epochs.
Okay.
So it has it has a custom module that does the minting. Then it also runs WASM, right? And all the apps or dApps are built with WASM. So I was in the original team that came up with WASM. So
Yeah.
there's kind of like I guess a soft place in my heart to like work on WASM.
So when you say all the dApps, you mean the like the star names, like these sort of applications built on Stargaze are not modules; they're built with CosmWasm.
Yes, exactly. So all the kind of like end user facing stuff are built with contracts. But the thing is, we do use kind of elements of the chain as well. So like, obviously staking and the main layer of governance happens through the chain, through the SDK. But our team is, we are we have expertise in both the SDK and CosmWasm. So we definitely want to work on kind of the integrations a bit more. One thing we're working on now is kind of interesting is that we're working. So one thing you don't have access to on the contract side is like the ABCI layer, where you can perform actions after every single block.
Yeah.
Right? So we're working on this cron module that will plug into the contracts. So then any contract can subscribe to get like a callback after every block. So then it can run contract code after every block. So this is something that we are going to use for our timed auction feature that is coming soon.
Okay. So just mindful of, maybe some people aren't familiar with ABCI or what that means, but ABCI is this interface between Tendermint consensus and essentially the Cosmos SDK. And within the Cosmos SDK, there's modules. Whenever those modules are performing an operation, they communicate with Tendermint through ABCI. It is essentially the way that the consensus talks to the execution layer. What you're saying is that CosmWasm as a module doesn't have direct access to ABCI. And so what you need to have like some kind of other module that creates events such that CosmWasm can subscribe to those events and perform an action when like this event happens. So it could be like, okay, a block's been produced, CosmWasm needs to do something. It can subscribe to this cron job, essentially get like some kind of event handler or something, and then perform an action.
Yeah, exactly. And that just opens their door to like so many things that you can build with this, right? So we're going to open source this, and then you can, for example,
sorry, can you like maybe explain? So what kinds of things, like, I guess I understand how this works, but I guess I don't understand how it would be used practically. And
okay. So a practical use case for this in Stargaze is timed auctions, right? So right now in our marketplace, we have a buy now feature, kind of like, you could go to eBay, you could just buy it now. And it also has offers, so you can put an offer on an NFT. But what we're working on now is timed auctions. So you can auction off, let's say you want to auction off like a regular English auction or a Dutch auction, and you want to find the best price for it within like an auction time of like a day or 3 days. Right. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of set a timer. You can say how long you want to do the auction for. You can set the reserve price. And then, people just come in and bid. And then at the end of the auction, right, like the chain has to know to settle the auction. Right. Yeah. So that's when the timing thing is important. So that's when this cron module will, send a call back to the contract to say, hey, this auction is over. You need to settle the auction. Right.
I think this is something that Larry was talking about also when he was talking about his CosmWasm SDK, right? Because the CosmWasm SDK wouldn't have this issue. It talks directly to ABCI. Is that?
Yeah, it wouldn't have this issue if it was integrated, a bit more at that level. Yeah. So, it's still early days, and everyone's working on better tooling and kind of better infrastructure for CosmWasm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is exciting. So you were talking about some of there's obviously like all of the apps are built using CosmWasm. There's some custom modules there. As a validator, though, what other stuff am I doing? I mean, I'm not running a Stargaze validator yet. Maybe at some point. What other things are validators doing in terms of like, are they doing any of this IPFS storage or like, yeah?
So they're not doing any of that yet.
Okay.
So right now as a validator for Stargaze, the main thing is you have to support CosmWasm. So like your resources are going to be, a bit higher than running a regular SDK chain.
Yeah.
But we are, so the kind of the backend layer of Stargaze, there's a lot of kind of infrastructure that we had to build to like be able to serve a monkey pick, right? So, a lot of other kind of NFT platforms are very centralized. They're most of them are just databases, and they only use kind of crypto for kind of payments.
Mm.
And a lot of them don't use any kind of like decentralized storage provider or like anything like that. But we went with the decentralized kind of approach for Stargaze. There's a requirement that all collections have and data and metadata have to be stored on IPFS. And initially, we were the long term goal is to have the validators run like all the infra, right? That's the long term goal. But right now, we actually built our own IPFS gateway because the existing solutions weren't working that well, right?
Yeah.
So we tried some other providers out there, and they had like pretty high failure rates. Um, and also just like the website and the marketplace is very image heavy, so there's
Mm.
just a lot of kind of custom things we had to build because Cosmos doesn't have we don't have the graph, we don't have alchemy, or like Infura, or like all this kind of like backend infrastructure that you need to build like a well-performing site. So we had to like build all this stuff ourselves.
Yeah.
So we have kind of our own RPC cluster that serves data from the contract super fast. We have an IPFS gateway that's also incredibly fast and built in Rust. And then we have this like backend APIs that kind of form like the glue layer between the front end and the chain.
What's the challenge in integrating IPFS with Cosmos? Because like IPFS is, I think, fairly well integrated in the Ethereum ecosystem, and there's a lot of tooling and to facilitate the use of IPFS by contracts. My feeling is that's not really the case in Cosmos. That like we don't really have those things.
Yeah, we were able to reuse a lot of the kind of the Ethereum tooling for especially for on the creator side for like launching collections and kind of like the kind of build some like for example we have a tool called command line tool called Stargaze tools that uses some of the IPFS kind of tooling that's available for like Ethereum and Solana and so forth, and it kind of like wraps around that. There's also Stargaze Studio that's it's kind of like a front end wrapper around Stargaze tools. So we do use kind of the IPFS kind of tooling in that sense, but serving from IPFS is what we had to build. Most IPFS gateways are just incredibly slow, right? And no one wants to wait like 10 seconds or so for your monkey pick to launch.
Yeah.
Right? So,
like dial up.
And all existing solutions out there are pretty bad. So I think most marketplaces and NFT platforms end up building their own. And they probably end up like saving it on like Amazon or S3 or something like that just to make the website fast.
Right. So there's some kind of caching going on a centralized service. And okay. And what's the prospects of using, like, I know KYVE is like, it's a Cosmos chain that does this caching of like Arweave and IPFS. And obviously, there's in the Cosmos ecosystem, we have Akash, although they're not like a content delivery or like a content storage network. They're more of like a server space marketplace, right? But which could be potentially used maybe or as some kind of like infrastructure layer to hold this stuff. I guess like maybe KYVE is more a suitable way to maybe decentralize access. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
I haven't checked out KYVE yet, but I'll definitely check it out. But what the kind of direction we want to move in is like, for example, the RPC cluster that we have, right? Like if a validator wants to kind of plug into that network, then they can, and then maybe they'll get like delegations from the foundation or something for doing that.
Okay.
And then if a validator wants to run an IPFS node, then they can, and then they plug into like the rest of the other validators that are also running like IPFS nodes. But the thing is, like, it has to be provable, right? So if someone's going to get delegations or get tokens for doing that, it has to be provable that they're running this node, right? So that's kind of like the hard part to build, right? Because anyone can say, hey, we're running this where our tokens, right? So yeah.
Interesting. So validators are, might be running additional like RPC nodes in this cluster, but it's fairly vanilla, other than running CosmWasm and maybe some of them doing RPC.
And there's also some of them that run marketplace bots. So right now the marketplace is non-custodial. So if you place an offer, you don't have to escrow your NFT in custody of the contract. You can still use the NFT. You can use it for like token gated access to Discord channels and stuff like that. But if you own an NFT and then you transfer it somewhere else, then the offer in the marketplace is now stale, right? So we do have some validators run kind of bots to kind of clean up the marketplace and remove stale bids and stale asks, and they get a little bit of like a reward for doing that.
Oh, okay, interesting. And your CosmWasm implementations, is it permissioned or permissionless?
Yeah, it's permissioned.
Permissioned. Okay. And are there any plans, or are there any opportunities here to have other folks in the community, or like are you going sort of the way of osmosis by letting other teams build things there and like having this kind of ecosystem, or is it more just you're seeing it more as a tool for you guys to build things kind of like in-house?
No, I mean, it's a pretty open ecosystem. Anyone can submit a contract and upload it to the chain if they want. It just has to go through governance. There's already a bunch of projects that have launched, third-party projects that have launched on Stargaze, like the badges tool that I think you played around with a little bit. That was uploaded by Larry, right? And so far, like 100% of like ecosystem developer contracts have been accepted and uploaded and running on Stargaze.
Okay, so what are these other contracts? Like, what are people uploading as contracts on CosmWasm, other than this on the stuff that we see like on the website, like being able to mint NFTs and names and stuff like that?
Yeah, so these other projects kind of have their own sites. One of them is like a peer-to-peer kind of NFT trading protocol. It's called Pegasus. So you can have a basket of NFTs, and then you can trade it with another person that has another basket of NFTs. That's one of the things that's kind of built on it. Then there's like non-contract based tooling as well, right? So there's like ranking sites. So Hubble.tools is probably like the biggest kind of ranking site for Stargaze, and you can go and like track volume, and they have this like really nice kind of like live like mint and live sales streams, and they also do like a lot of interviews with the creators and stuff like that. So far that's some of the stuff that's kind of built on it. There's also a generative art platform that's built on Stargaze. So if you ever use like art blocks on Ethereum, it's kind of like the same thing. I think this is kind of underused. I think to me this is one of the more kind of interesting kind of ecosystem projects that's launched on Stargaze, because it actually generates the NFT in real time, right? Oh, cool. So when you go to mint, it'll create some art kind of based on your address and based on the block height, and it'll create like a unique piece of art. So that's something to check out too. And
what's it called?
It's called Public Works, and I believe it's publicworks.art.
Okay, we'll link to that. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's interesting. And as as an NFT platform, I want to ask you this earlier. I'm asking now. How do you reason? Like, how do you like? I feel that you kind of have to strike a balance between different users of NFTs, because you have creators, obviously, like they want to create art and want to sell it and get people to like be excited about it. Then you have enthusiasts, and I would put kind of myself in that category also, although like not super enthused, but like I've got a couple of NFTs because I just think they're cool and I just like want to have them. And there's like a community aspect, right? So it's like, okay, might want to put this as a PFP, but I'm not trading. And then there's like traders. There's people who are just trading the floor and trying to make money basically with NFTs. How do you strike a balance between these different users and trying to satisfy all of them? And I'm asking you this because I saw some of the comments you were responding to today in one of my tweets.
Yeah. It is very hard to satisfy everyone. So yeah, you're right. So there's hardcore traders. There are people who come in and trade hundreds of times a day sometimes. And then there's people who are collectors, and then there are people who are kind of more casual users. Then there's people who just like the art, right? Just purely for the art. They don't care how rare something is.
Yeah.
And then there's people who are there purely to try and flip stuff. So they want to come in as early as possible. And then there's people who just like the community vibe, right? Like a new collection launches and they just kind of have fun, kind of like changing all their avatars and PFPs, and then they have their own little token gated chat and stuff like that. So
yeah,
there's various types of users, and then there's people who just creators that want to push the limits and do some more interesting stuff, right? So there's this Pixel Wizard project that just launched, and it has kind of code in the back end that pulls up like token prices, so you can get a Pixel Wizard. Yeah. So if you get the Pixel Wizard for like near or something, you like press a certain key and it'll show you like the token price for it in like real time.
Is that like SVG based art, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's SVG based art, but it's like running in an iframe and there's like JavaScript code that's like executing in the backend.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's kind of a novel medium, because most NFTs like just JPEGs or maybe GIFs sometimes, but
yeah. So I'm very excited about this. I'm very excited about like new projects that are launching. They're going to be kind of pushing the boundaries of what you can do. But getting back to your other question about, how do you deal with all these different types of users? I think what's going to happen is that platforms are going to kind of move into verticals to please like different types of users, right? So I think one good example of this is Blur on Ethereum, and Blur is like focused only on traders, right? So if you go and use Blur, like the NFT like image itself is tiny. It's like smaller than a postage stamp. It's so tiny, like it's comically tiny, right? So they don't like focus on the art at all. It's just purely trading, right? So if you go to it, it looks more like, like a pro trading platform, like I don't know, Coinbase Pro or something like that, right?
Okay.
So the thing is, the great thing about Stargaze is that because it's its own chain, anyone can build other types of clients and websites for it, right? So if anyone wants, they can build something that looks like Blur that works on Stargaze, right? So I think what may happen some point in the future is that there might be different, instead of just Stargaze as a zone, there might be different verticals, different sites to please different types of users, right? So people that are in it just for the art, right, may have a site that has like just full screen art for like everything, and maybe the rarity isn't even shown, right? So if you look at Foundation on Ethereum, that site is kind of designed, to please just the creators and the artists. And Blur would be on the other spectrum just for traders, right? So I think that's what will end up happening. Right now, we're trying to please everyone because the Cosmos is still kind of small, so you can still kind of do this right now.
So you're saying it'll come down to interfaces where the platform remains kind of agnostic. Features will get developed on the platform, but Stargaze, the website and the marketplace and the launcher, may not be the place where most people interact with it. They're using other websites. They're using applications that people have built for their kind of own, use cases.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Stargaze is almost like 2 or 3 startups in one, right? Because we're building Stargaze.zone, which is like the main client for it, and but we're also like building the blockchain, right? And then we have all these like middle infrastructure where we have built all this kind of like image processing pipeline, all this tooling, IPFS stuff, and indexers and all this kind of stuff. So whereas if you look at something like OpenSea, right, they only focus on the interface. They're not also building Ethereum, right? So it's at some point in time, I don't know, who knows, it might break into like 3 separate companies or something. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Go the way of Tendermint or something like
that.
Yeah. Without the drama, I hope. Yeah. Let's I want to talk about interoperability, because it's such a central topic, I think, to obviously to the Cosmos ecosystem, but also what you guys are doing. And I had this conversation with Patricio Werthaler of POAP a couple of months ago, and I asked them this about interoperability and the idea of like moving NFTs across chains and ecosystems. And his response was pretty it was pretty clear, and it was that NFTs are inherently tied to the provenance, like the chain on which they were minted, and that if you take that away, you sort of lose the value of an NFT, or you diminish its value. And it kind of got me thinking. And obviously, in like POAP is a very EVM centric project. They're on Ethereum mainnet and Gnosis chain, and they sort of like want to occupy that space. And also, I think they're trying to, they're very keen and intent on protecting their brand and the sort of like prestige that comes with being like the main proof of attendance attestation service on Ethereum. So like, there's like a strong incentive for him to want to keep that thing on Ethereum. But it got me thinking about this idea of provenance, and in the context of NFTs that were potentially moving across chains and ecosystems. And at some point, these assets are like living on other chains and other ecosystems, and they've been bridged over several times. And, there maybe we've lost the sort of provenance, or even the original chain on which you could always go and find that out. But like as a user, you sort of like are no longer attached to the state, right? The consensus that sort of like minted this thing. Is that something you think about, like when thinking about interoperability and NFTs, and how? Yeah, and if so, like how would you address this? And I guess it's a broader question about what the challenges are when it comes when talking about interoperability and NFTs.
Sure, yeah, and I think it comes down to the kind of different types of users again, right? So right now we're still in the early days, and kind of a lot of people we interact with and talk to, there are certain values that they care about, right? And then there's mainstream retail users, and there's certain values that they care or don't care about, right? So there's some users on Stargaze who don't even know what the word provenance means and don't care about it, right? They just want to get like their fun little avatar or something. And then there's more kind of people into builders in the blockchain world who do care about this stuff. And yeah, provenance is definitely tied to the chain. And in the Cosmos world, actually, on any chain, right? Everything's on chain, so there's like a block explorer, right? And so you can always track the provenance. And then we're working on ICS 721, which is IBC NFT transfers. And then if an NFT does transfer to another chain, you can start tracking its provenance there as well, right? So I think what we will have at some point is like a block explorer, like a multi-chain interchain block explorer that can track track the provenance, right? So I think that's very useful tooling that can be built after IBC transfers are a thing, right? So right now, if you use MintScan, if you do an IBC transfer of like a regular token, right, you can kind of follow the provenance of that token, right? You can see that it was IBC transferred from like one chain to Osmosis or something, and then transferred to another chain. You can still kind of track it. So even after we do have cross-chain NFTs, it's still possible to track it. And I think it's just solving the provenance problem is just a tooling problem, right? So we'll have some kind of provenance tracker that's like just multi-chain and just built across all these block explorers.
And you don't. So do you think that a derivative of an NFT then would trade at, or would have the same value as the original, in the same way that a fungible token typically trades around the same value? Or like what's the premium there, or not the premium, but like what's the premium for the original asset over the bridged asset?
So we had to be careful using the term derivative here, because that's also used to describe a derivative or project itself. So if someone makes a copy of CryptoPunks, then that's a derivative NFT project. But I think you're talking about more like a synthetic NFT, like a
synthetic is the word I meant to use. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So if you move an NFT from Stargaze to, let's say, like another chain, the original kind of provenance kind of can be tracked back to Stargaze because it was like minted there, right? But then there might be some like some kind of like I don't know, lending and borrowing platform or something like that on this other chain that they might want to use, right? And if they want to kind of get back the original asset, they still have to kind of transfer it back to Stargaze, right?
Yeah.
So they can still kind of like use it as its own NFT on this other chain, right? To me, it's no different from moving IBC assets, like fungible assets, right? It just depends on the security of that chain, right? So if they move it to a chain that's like, like a testnet or something, then it may not be as secure, and they can possibly have it get stuck there, right?
Yeah.
And then you have this issue where the NFT is like still locked up on Stargaze, and now it's no longer available because that other chain went down, right?
Yeah.
So that just kind of puts the burden on the user, but that's just exactly how IBC works anyway.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what's the status of ICS 721, right? So like ERC 721 is the Ethereum token standard for NFTs, and there's like other standards that have come since then, and I don't know all of them by number, but and then ICS 721 is sort of the CosmWasm implementation of that, or Cosmos SDK implementation, I guess.
Well, there's two separate things. So there is the NFT token standard. There's the SDK module. So it's just SDK.NFT, which is the SDK module.
For the
then
token
there's
standard.
And then there's CW 721, which is the CosmWasm standard, and the Stargaze stuff is based on CW 721. So we take CW 721 and added royalties to it, pretty much.
So an ICS 721 token that's minted using the Cosmos SDK module, is that fungible with the CosmWasm, the CW 721 implementation, or are they interoperable?
Yes, they're interoperable. So like the point of like a spec is to make like a tech agnostic kind of thing, right? So just like ICS 20, just like ICS 20 is the fungible token standard, right?
Yeah.
So you can move fungible tokens, IBC assets across any Cosmos chain. ICS 721 is the same. So the NFT token standards themselves are the SDK module and CW 721, and then the cross-chain transfer protocol is ICS 721.
Right. But are they tangibly the same thing? Or if you minted an ICS 721 NFT using the module, and then you move that into the CosmWasm contract on the same chain, are you then dealing with a synthetic on the same chain? Or is
Oh,
it
you're talking about if
tangibly
you
the same?
have the SDK module and CosmWasm on the same chain?
Yeah, I guess that wouldn't make sense. I guess this standard sort of exists so that, say, like an ICS 721 token minted on chain A can move to Stargaze that uses CW 721 uh, and not the module, I presume, right? So it's just so that we have interoperability between chains that are using the sort of vanilla module, the Cosmos SDA module, and chains that are using the CosmWasm standard, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like on a chain like Omniflix or Asset Mantle that use just the SDK module, you can use ICS 721 to transfer like one of their NFTs to Stargaze, or you can
Okay.
transfer Stargaze NFT through ICS 721 to one of those other chains, right? And because
Okay.
it's agnostic to kind of the underlying technology, it still works.
Okay, but that doesn't work yet because IBC doesn't work over these standards yet. Is that right?
Oh no, it's the implementations for ICS 721 on the SDK side and on the CosmWasm side are done. We're just waiting to where so this thing called Game of NFTs that's launching next month,
Okay.
and we're just kind of waiting to kind of battle test all this stuff out, right? So we just had to kind of just kind of test all the edge cases, right? So like, like, is it possible to take an NFT and just transfer it across multiple chains like millions of times and cause some kind of attack that way? Or
Mm.
is it possible for an NFT to not properly get burned so it'll exist on two different chains, right? So we need to kind of like really, really battle test this stuff first.
Okay.
It's been audited and everything, and we can just turn it on. I mean, we can deploy the contract now and build an interface for it, but we want to test it out first in like a
Okay. So
more of a real world environment.
I didn't know this was going on. So right now, basically, we're sort of like at the cusp of being able to transfer NFTs between different chains.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Talk about this. Like, this is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be pretty cool. Each chain has kind of like a unique kind of value prop, right? And there's kind of unique protocols running on each chain. And we're getting to the point where, like, NFTs are becoming more of a thing in Cosmos. In most of the other ecosystems is bringing in most of the volume. Like if you look at Ethereum or Solana, something like 60% of like the new people coming in are coming in for NFTs, right?
Yeah.
Cosmos in terms of like retail mainstream adoption is a little behind, but that's going to change. That's going to change in next couple of years, especially when we have like high profile projects like DYDX launching. There's going to be just a lot more people coming into the ecosystem. And then yeah, and then after that, I think we will see kind of like a bit more usage of this stuff. In terms of cross chain, you can do something like, for example, like Secret Network. They have their NFTs can have private metadata, right?
Yeah.
So let's hypothetically say you're making a game and you have like assets that you want to keep private or something, right? Then you can like maybe like mint those on like Secret, but then you want to trade them, then you can like transfer them to Stargaze and trade it in its marketplace, right? Or let's just say a creator is really affiliated with some other chain for whatever reason, and they kind of want to mint it there, but then they want to trade it in the marketplace in Stargaze, then they can move it over, and vice versa, right?
Does
So you
Secret
can,
use the same standard, the ICS 721?
yeah, Secret uses like a fork of CW 721. They had to obviously change it because they have their own kind of custom privacy stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
But we do want to work with them at some point and get IBC transfers working with Secret as well.
Yeah. No, that would be cool. So,
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I guess then the world starts looking a little bit more like NFTs on Ethereum, where you can mint an NFT on like a contract, and then you can move that NFT to any marketplace that supports ERC 721. So you can move it to OpenSea or Rarible or whatever, Showtime, or I'm not super plugged into these things, but those are the three I know off the top of my head. And then they can be traded there. There might be like different amounts of volume on each of these platforms, but at least you're able to do that. And then you can also interface with any kind of external facing product that supports that standard. So for example, like one example would be like Twitter Blue, that is able to verify ERC 721s, or at least with OpenSea they can. So you could do like token gated communities on any of these chains, as long as you get a Kepler wallet that has NFTs in it. It doesn't matter what chain it's on. It just understands that like this wallet has ICS or CW 721 tokens in it.
Yes, exactly. So, let's say you want to have your Twitter avatar, that like hexagon thing that they, if you associate like an NFT with Twitter, let's say you want your bad kid to show up there, right? Then you can at some point in the future, sometime this year, you'll be able to transfer an NFT to Ethereum, over Gravity Bridge or something, and then once you have it on Ethereum, then you can add it to your Twitter profile.
Okay,
so that's going to
cool.
be one use case.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys will have. Well, this brings me to my next question. Outposts. Yeah. So how is that going to work? And through which you mentioned Gravity Bridge with Ethereum. What other? I guess maybe define. So like maybe explain what an outpost is, because I feel like it's a topic that a lot of people have been kind of throwing around, and my grasp of this concept is not full yet, so maybe that would be helpful.
This kind of concept is still we're kind of in the early days of figuring this out. We wanted to call it Starbases, but it seems like the word outpost is what people are using, so we'll just use the same terminology.
It's a bit old timey, I find. It evokes fucking like horses and
right. And it's like it's a bit weird. You have an outpost, and then you're creating like a settlement or something on like another chain. But basically what it is like kind of like a proxy. So in the case of Stargaze, it's going to be like a proxy to the marketplace on another chain. So if this other chain wants to use Stargaze Marketplace, this outpost abstracts all the IBC work, right? So this outpost will kind of handle the ICS 721 transfer and just kind of like do all that dirty work for this chain. And then in the view of that chain, they're just talking to a regular contract, right? So they'll talk to the outpost, and they'll be able to like list on the marketplace. They'll be able to do auctions, like pretty much all the stuff you can do on the marketplace. They'll be able to do it on this other chain, as if the marketplace was like live and living on that chain. But behind the scenes is getting proxy to Stargaze.
Okay. And we could use any sort of bridge like Axelar or whatever. What's the prospect of I guess there's a broader question about interoperability. What are your thoughts on like zk-IBC implementations to effectively kind of eliminate the need for a bridge, or like some sort of a mechanism that's sits between two chains, where you just having an implementation of IBC in a ZK circuit on Ethereum?
I haven't looked into ZK IBC yet, but it definitely sounds fascinating. But in the current state of bridges, Axelar is launching this thing called generalized message passing, where you can also do NFT transfers. So we're probably going to work with them for NFT transfers on other chains. So maybe Solana, maybe Polygon, maybe some of these other chains, and then use ICS 721 within Cosmos because it's IBC native, is Cosmos native, right? And then we're probably going to work with Gravity on bridging to Ethereum. But that could be done with Axelar too, and we might use both. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that yet.
And does this mean we can also move NFTs from Ethereum over to Cosmos? So it's bi-directional, right? Like, you could have like your CryptoPunk or whatever on like Stargaze Marketplace or something like that.
Yeah, and we're so close to getting that working. So there's only one missing piece of that right now. So with ICS 721, you can transfer an NFT from Gravity to Stargaze, right? And Gravity, you can transfer an NFT to Gravity, right? But there has to be there's the only missing piece is to detect that an NFT has been transferred to Gravity, and then to create the ICS 721 packet to send that to Stargaze. So that's like the only missing kind of piece left to get that working.
And this NFT would then be sort of locked in a contract on Ethereum, such that you don't end up with this situation where they exist in two places effectively.
Yeah, it'll be essentially held by escrow in the contract in Gravity, and a synthetic version will be minted on Stargaze.
Okay. And I heard you speaking about this somewhere too, where you in the context of scaling, right? So like, okay, right now I think we maybe don't need to scale like on chain like Stargaze to anything more than what Tendermint and the Cosmos SDK can provide. But in the context of scaling, what are your thoughts on using interchain accounts to use Stargaze to mint NFTs on other chains? Like,
yeah, I think I think that's fascinating, and I think a good use for that might be in DeFi protocols, right? So in Uniswap v3, for example, your liquidity position is represented by an NFT, right?
Yep.
And I believe that's going to happen in Cosmos too. We're also kind of working on a DEX, and is going to work that way as well. But I think let's say there is a chain that is a DeFi protocol, but they don't have expertise in like NFTs, and they don't want to manage anything with like NFTs, right? So that protocol, if it wants, can use like Stargaze as this like kind of NFT infra. And if it wants to mint like a LP NFT or whatever, it could like do that like over ICA or something like that onto Stargaze.
Okay, so it would be like a Stargaze native NFT, where all these things, when we were talking about provenance, right? Like the provenance goes back to Stargaze, but you've effectively minted it on another chain using ICA. So like the other chain would have to support 721 standard, and then you use ICA to mint it there, but then it would always have to go back to to Stargaze to sort of find its home, if you want to have like the true native token.
Yeah, and we're still in the early days of figuring this stuff out, but we're going to have some kind of interoperability between ICA, ICQ, and also Cosmosm, right? Because Cosmosm can also have interacting contracts on other chains, other Cosmos chains.
That's super cool. Like, this is really like interesting stuff. Happy we're able to dive deep here. So yeah, we talked a little bit about this earlier, and I mentioned it in the intro, but you were saying how you think that we're spending way too much time on infrastructure and not enough on product. And I think that's an interesting take, because I'm kind of this opinion that there are infrastructure application cycles that kind of respond to each other, where we're like, we build applications and then people come, right, and we kind of push infrastructure to its limits, and then people build infrastructure. We've seen this throughout like all of technology, going back to like the earliest example would be like people built airplanes before they built runways, right? Or people built light bulbs before we had an electricity grid. And I think this also to some extent exists in crypto, right? We built Bitcoin before we had a Bitcoin network, and we pushed Ethereum to its limits during the ICO boom and like that whole phase, and then we went on and scaled Ethereum. And I feel like right now there's a lot of the last cycle had its kind of flagship applications, and NFTs were the kind of application I think that really had its moment there. And now it feels like we're going back to some kind of infrastructure building phase where a lot of people are focusing on infrastructure. I mean, like I'm publishing a post in a couple of days. So it just has like, here are the 10 infrastructure things that we're looking at. Like, do you think that the current infrastructure that we have can support all the applications that people would want to build? And yeah, like where do you see like where do you see this cycle sort of playing out?
Yeah. So my take on this, I mean, first of all, I think infrastructure is terribly, terribly important, right? We won't be here if the infrastructure wasn't there. My take on this is that if you look at Terra, right? Terra was just a vanilla CosmWasm chain. It got to the point where it was like the third largest chain by volume, right? And it was doing just fine, right? It was just doing just fine for a while, right? And what brought Terra down wasn't anything to do with scalability, right? And right now we have all these alt L1s. A lot of them have plenty of block space that can still be used. So I think we're at a moment in time where I think the infrastructure is pretty good. I think like right now, Cosmos is only limited by the creativity of the devs, right? You can come and build anything on Cosmos right now. All the tooling is kind of there now, is pretty mature. So we don't necessarily need to be focused on kind of like pie in the sky, crazy kind of scalability right now, because especially with the recent downturn, at least right now, right, it could totally handle the number of users. So
yeah.
So I think it's a really good time to kind of focus on applications too, right? And typically how it at least worked in the web world, or at least in the Web 2 world, was you would build an app first, right? And then you would scale it when you get the enough users that you have to scale, right? So I think we are doing a little bit of premature optimization right now, I think, crypto in general, because a lot of the teams, like for example Stargaze, like our team could build scalability solutions if we really want to, right? So if we really want to, we can work on like optimistic block propagation and stuff like that. It's just that we don't necessarily have a need for it now, right? But if, like, let's say, like, Disney comes to us or something and says, hey, we want to launch this collection of Stargaze, I'm like, oh, okay, let's take 2 or 3 weeks and scale things even more, right? So I think there's maybe a little bit of underappreciation for teams that could kind of operate that way, where they operate a bit more like a typical startup, where you focus on the product first and then you scale when you have to, instead of just your entire story is only about scaling.
Right? Yeah. I think I see your point. I mean, from my perspective, I think there's a lot of infrastructure that's being built right now that doesn't focus specifically on scaling, or maybe scaling is one of the benefits, but it's not the only benefit. And one area is like this whole modular blockchain thesis, right? And I think scaling is an important aspect of that, but I think it's also just making it easier for people to launch applications. Because like launching your own, CosmWasm chain, launching your own Cosmos chain is like not an easy feat. Like you got to get validators and everything. Okay, like security is going to help with that, but it's a big undertaking, right? Whereas if you just have to launch like a fuel roll up, and there are tools that just make it easy for you to do that, and you're a developer and you don't want to think about consensus, and you're not building anything that requires you to really like optimize consensus or like look into blocks and stuff, then you can do that. And so like I see that as kind of a little bit of WordPress era, right? Where like people are just launching their own chains and launching their own decentralized applications using something like Celestia. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that just has like, well, that's necessary and I think important that doesn't really have to do with scaling. So like interoperability protocols is one of them where, okay, we want people to be able to move tokens between ecosystems that go beyond Cosmos. So like all the ZK stuff I was talking about, or like Axelar, these things. DAO tooling, like all the DAO tooling, like I've been wishing for years that we could do like multi-sig the way we do in Ethereum. Like we desperately need that stuff, and it's great. And like they're just rocking it. Custody, like seed phrases are not the way to onboard the next billion or 2 billion users. Like that's ridiculous. And so we need MPC infrastructure. We need account abstraction tooling to be able to build wallets that people can do recovery. And the list goes on. And I feel like this is the kind of infrastructure that I think empowers and really inspires developers to build better tools to then like bring to build better applications that will onboard the next, like 500 million billion users, because applications are going to be easier to use, because then we'll have people that are like inspired to build cooler things. And that's like what I'm really quite excited about right now.
Yeah, you do have a really good point there, but I think, maybe we can separate out UX as kind of like its own thing, right? That's maybe separate from scalability, but like, yeah, UX is terribly important. And it's one of the reasons why people would use a centralized exchange over like a decentralized exchange.
Yeah.
That could definitely use a lot of work, right? Wallets could improve a lot. We need to explore like different types of custody solutions, different types of like authentication. I think Kepler is doing a really good job where you can just kind of like log in with Google, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we need to add like other services and stuff like that, and just make key management and wallets just a lot simpler. So I'm a huge fan of that stuff.
Yeah. I think like a lot of infrastructure, is kind of like developer tooling that ends up making UX a lot better. Like this single sign-on in Kepler, it's made possible because of, I think they're using Web3 sign-in, or what used to be called Taurus or something in the back end there.
Yep.
And that's infrastructure that people use all the time, right? And don't realize that there's like some other company in the back end, building that infrastructure, making it available, and making sure that like they get access to their wallet next time they log in with their Google account.
I don't think people really know what's going on behind the scenes there, right? It's actually like doing like threshold signing. So it's actually like sharding your key into like, a few different shards and storing them on validators. And then when you log in again, it uses your authentication token and reconstructs the key on the client side.
Yeah.
Right. So it's doing some pretty interesting stuff like in the back.
Yeah. And then privacy is a huge one too. I think that is, one of the, like, I sort of see it as the web's HTTPS moment, where basically we couldn't do credit card payments on the internet until I think it was the Netscape team came around and developed HTTPS. And that made, Amazon possible, right? It made like all of this, all of e-commerce possible. And then there was a long time during which we didn't really have HTTPS outside of payments. And around 2012, I think, or maybe even earlier, like Google decided that, okay, Chrome is just going to throw up a big warning every time you use a website that doesn't use HTTPS. And that kind of forced everybody to go to private, to HTTPS. And I feel like in crypto, if you want to onboard like 1 billion users, small businesses and corporations, you need privacy. Like you absolutely can't go around like just showing your entire net worth and history of financial transactions to everyone for all of eternity. And, I kind of, when, I promise this ties into something else I want to ask you about, but when ICNS came out, I kind of threw up my hands. I was like, this is crazy. Like, I mean, basically there's zero. I mean, okay, maybe we don't have the technology yet. And maybe, we don't have the privacy technology yet to make it such that you can buy a domain and like not tie it to your existing wallet, so you don't see the provenance of the funds to pay for the fees. But at least tell people, right? Like there should be a huge warning when you're registering the name. And I don't have a Stargaze name, but I looked at the website. It doesn't have this warning. But there should be like a massive like, please be aware that by doing this, whatever you do with this address will forever be known to anyone who looks at it, and all your past, present, and future transactions will be made public. And like, by the way, governments and the IRS and are actively using things like chain analysis and like openly using them. And so, yeah, I think we can't fool ourselves about this like pseudonymity that we used to have when crypto was relatively early. We don't have that anymore. That like that era is gone. How do you think of privacy then in the context of Stargaze, and specifically in the context of Starname? Or sorry, is it Star Names or
it's Stargaze names.
Stargaze name. Sorry, I confused it with Starname, which was another failed project. I don't know if they failed, but not. But how do we fix this? Because like we're not going to onboard like the next half of humanity if everyone's financial information and transactions are made public.
Yeah, so there's a couple things going on here, right? So a lot of the people in NFT communities are kind of the opposite, that they want to flex their like what they have. They want to people like to share their profile and their collections with other people. And then the creators want to be known, right? And the collectors want to know who the creators are, right? And a lot of people want to only buy NFTs from the creators that they trust is not going to like rug them, right? So they want to maybe follow them on Twitter. They want to see their like past like history, what they talk about, all this kind of stuff. And there's this whole kind of community aspect to it, right? So the demographic of the people that are kind of into NFTs, at least right now, don't seem to care too much about privacy. It's just maybe the state of the community right now. Well, what was I going to say? Like, so it's and also kind of like younger demographics. Like if you look at people who use like Venmo, right? They're like all their Venmo transactions are public. They're sharing it with their friends and stuff like that.
Are they?
People just kind of.
I mean, we don't have Venmo in Europe, but.
Oh, okay.
Are they public?
Yeah. You can have like you can have transactions that are public. I think it's private by default, but you can have transactions that are public too, so people can see what you're buying with your credit card and like who you're Venmoing to and stuff like that. So I think there's a couple of angles. There's a couple of things going on here. There's like younger demographics are care a little less about privacy. Everything's open and they celebrate everything being open. But privacy is terribly important for financial transactions, but it may not be as important for NFTs right now. I
think for NFTs it doesn't. But like, look, I mean, like, I don't know, I don't flex an NFT collection, but see, I do flex like these synths back here.
Oh, those are cool.
But I don't like flex my my bank account or anything like that. And there's a separation between like, okay, maybe I bought like, maybe I've got like $2,000 worth of synths, but you still can't deduct my bank account, So there, I think there's like a level of granularity that is necessary because like these things are so just connected and tied together. It feels a bit unsettling to me that there's not more just awareness around the kind of long-term risks of using, and I think mostly it's like people put themselves at a really high risk of like tax audits, because most people I think just don't do their crypto taxes right. for those who do them, and those who don't, well, just don't do it. And I think there's like a huge risk that authorities might come after them, even if they've done things relatively right, or they thought they've done things right at some point in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking for a day where privacy is like a first class primitive, across Cosmos and like everywhere, right? So I'm very excited about projects like Penumbra that are launching soon, and they're going to have like their own like shielded pool, and then who knows in the future, maybe there could be like cross-chain transactions between Penumbra and Stargaze even. But yeah, I mean, getting back to names, right? So Stargaze names, like anyone can go and mint it, right? But it's optional. Like you don't have to do it, right? And if you do want to kind of create a name, you can always like create it with like a different wallet or something if you don't want to expose a different wallet. It's really, it just leaves it up to the user to associate whatever they want with it, right?
But the issue
like,
there is that even if you create with another wallet, you still need to move funds from your main wallet to get in order to pay for the fees. And so unless you like go through an exchange or something, right? It's like it's not trivial to be private.
It's not trivial yet. It's not trivial yet, but like I'm looking to the future where there'll be some kind of like mixer or something in the ecosystem, and you'll easily be able to send funds to like a new account, right? But right now is not trivial right now.
Yeah, I think that like any domain name service that respects people's privacy should have that as a built-in feature. Just like if you're going to buy this thing, hey, there's going to be some added fees, but they're going to go to some mixer, and that will be all taken care of. And like you're going to get a fresh address with fees on it, or like we're going to front the fees for you, like some kind of thing, right? Where your identity is detached from the account.
Totally, yeah, and it should be an option for people that want to have it as an option.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I did want to talk about a little for my own kind of selfish reasons. I want to talk about Stargaze Studio. So I think soon we'll probably have a concept where there'll be artwork generated for each episode, and that'll be kind of like unique artwork. A little bit like Epicenter, right? Like where we have this kind of polygon thing that people know us for there. I'd like to have something similar here. So we're working on some concepts. And so, in the next few months, I hope to be able to have a listener NFT, kind of like a POAP, right? Where every episode, like, you come on, you get your own, artwork, and people who listen to the podcast within a certain time window, they can get this kind of proof of listen NFT. And,
cool.
Yeah, and I'd love to use Stargaze to do this. And this kind of throws me back to like early days of crypto podcasting when Let's Talk Bitcoin used to have their magic word, and so you'd have to listen for the magic word. We would say the magic word on air, and then you would get some tokens for like having.
Oh, really? How do you know that? Word. Oh, fun.
This is like, yeah. Adam B. Levine had done this on Let's Talk Bitcoin platform. But anyway, so I'd love to like use some of the tools there. What are some I guess my question is, what are some of the applications you think that NFTs can be used for creators? And is Stargaze, or will Stargaze work on like better creator tools for podcasters and YouTubers to kind of integrate their content with Stargaze so that they can build their communities around this? And we've got like other ideas too. Like, we do this conference, Nebula Summit, which we'll be announcing soon. And we'd love to have it such that people who have our NFTs have these POAPs, right? They get access to early access tickets and stuff like this.
Totally, yeah. I mean, we're always making the creator tooling better. So Stargaze actually launched with a command line tool called Stargaze Tools, and we could have actually launched with a like a nice website for kind of creators to launch a collection. But then what we realized is that at that time there wasn't like really good kind of filtering on the website, and creators that went the extra step to like learn the tooling and use the tooling also had like better collections and better art and stuff like that, right? So it was on purpose to actually launch with the command line tool, because it was like a little bit of a barrier to like entry. And when we did launch, there was like 600 or 700 projects that wanted to launch on Stargaze at like on the first day, and we had to like bring it down to like 10 or 11, right? So so having the command line tooling initially actually helped, you know, bring on better, like higher quality projects on Stargaze. But now after kind of like the filtering and sorting and stuff is there, now we can start improving the tooling so we can get everyone to launch whatever they want, right? So that's the goal. Stargaze Studio is still in the early days, but you can use it now and launch a collection. I think you've been playing with badges a little bit. I think we're going to be, I think that is going to be coming into Stargaze Studio as well.
Yeah.
And just overall, like better creator tooling. And also a lot of creators are asking for like ways to like track their sales and like generate like data and like reports they need for taxes and stuff like that. So that's just kind of like an ongoing effort. And
cool. Very cool.
Yeah. They're going to be building more stuff.
Yeah, we'll definitely reach out to you whenever we've got a bit more of a handle about like the creative aspect of this, and see how we can build it in. Like I think as we wrap up here, the question I wanted to ask you is like, you know, it just to contextualize here, we discussed this a little bit. Like the 2017 cycle, you know, the big use case there I think was funding. So you know, there was all this exuberance around ICOs, and at some point, like that fizzled out, and now people still do fundraising using a blockchain, but they have these like SAFT agreements, and they've kind of structured things around that, and that is kind of what that produced, right? Like ICOs kind of produced this new, more serious, or like kind of regulatory compliant way of doing funding. Now in the last cycle, like we had all this exuberance around NFTs and like just like tons of people pouring money into this, and you know, all of the kind of insanity. I think, you know, for me, it felt very similar to the ICO bubble. What do you think is coming out of that? Like, what do you think we're getting out of all this exuberance? Like, what's the kind of child that births from like all this insanity, where in like 2-3 years from now we'll be like, oh, that's what all of that was for, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is that anytime something new comes out, some new technology comes out, it goes through like a toy phase, right? This overly kind of exuberant kind of phase. And that's where NFTs are right now. They're in the toy phase. People are just kind of playing around with it. You know, our goal right now, our job is to kind of build the infra, build the tooling, right? And then at some point in time, people will use it for all kinds of stuff, right? You know, like, I don't know, maybe your home deed will be like an NFT or something, or like it could get to the point where like all media is like NFTs, and it's just the default standard, right? At the end of the day, it's just a container for data, right? So you can, it's going to move beyond just art and stuff like that. Like, I think I talked earlier about like, you know, LP positions as NFTs. You can also imagine like, you know, let's say you are building a strategy for like sommelier or something like that, right? That strategy can be encoded as like NFT metadata, right? And the person that authored that created that could, you know, monetize it and sell it as an NFT, right? You can have one thing we're looking to build is like a blogging platform, right? Like you can like the content for the blog can just be metadata in the NFT, right? Maybe even like a governance forum or something that's based around it. So there's just so much stuff that you can build, and I think we're going to start seeing a lot more interesting stuff because the overly exuberant phase is kind of over.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that stuff being built. Shane, thanks so much for coming on. This has been like a really fascinating discussion. I've learned so much. I've also expanded you know, a little bit like my view of the space and where things might be going, and definitely got a much better understanding of like token standards and interoperability between Cosmosm and vanilla Cosmos module. So thanks for that. And yeah, look forward to continuing learning more about Stargaze as you guys build out this project.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was a really fun chat. Thank you.
Thanks. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We go live every week, so please make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell and the like button. And if you like this content, please consider staking with us. We're currently live on Evmos and Osmosis and some other networks very soon. So we'll see you next week.